Hello and welcome. This is Navigating AI Regulation. I'm Chris Hosking, SentinelOne's AI and Cloud Security Evangelist, and I'm joined today by Matt Berry, Director of Evangelism and Technical Marketing. Great to have you on, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
There's a lot that we want to cover today. Quick overview, we're going to be chatting about, at a high level, the AI attack surface. Why do we need regulation? And then the trends of regulation and deregulation that we've seen stateside, including the executive order that came out in December. I'd then like to give some detail about the EU AI Act. And when I start to go into that, it'll become quickly apparent why this is important. But I think there's a real opportunity here for US and non-European CISOs to take leadership positions using the EU AI Act as a lamp in the distance. And then finally, we're going to do just a quick peek into some of the things that SentinelOne does in the security for AI space. Let's kick it off. The reason why we wanted to have this conversation first off is because we are at a point where AI is mainstream. I'm certainly sure that that's something that you've all felt through last year. It went from grandparents discussing things like ChatGPT, which I think is the real trigger point for now you know that AI has made it. Enterprise adoption is here, and that's not just in any single department. We're seeing AI adoption across departments, across organizations, and so security needs to respond accordingly. And what I wanted to first break down was the difference between the attack surface of AI that you might be constructing versus AI that you're consuming, because the risk shifts from an infrastructure risk to often an employee risk. But let's start with AI construction. Given the rapid adoption of AI, it unfortunately is an increasingly attractive target for threat actors. I'm sure that everyone in the audience will have seen screenshots of chatbots that have been forced to hallucinate or provide responses that would sit outside of how organizations would hope their chatbots interact. These stem from misconfigurations and vulnerabilities in the infrastructure that's hosting that AI and running that AI that allow for opportunities that adversaries can have, things can engender data theft, the poisoning of the model, prompting of hallucination, the abuse of model context protocol. We've got a great blog on that, by the way. So if you want to find out more, I recommend checking out that blog. And resource hijacking. Resource hijacking I find quite interesting because from a cloud lens, this is a risk we've struggled with for quite some time now. I can tell you across our customer base, SentinelOne has observed the leakage of credentials and secrets associated with popular LLMs. Once those are leaked, an outside party is able to co-opt your usage of an LLM, use your credits, and change the way that your own AI is behaving. So we need to, very much in the same way that we understand what's the shared model of responsibility for the cloud, as we're building AI, how can we root out vulnerabilities and misconfigurations so that this stuff is secure by design? That's of
Yeah, total.
course. Oh, please, Matt.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna add one more thing on here, and I think that you've done a good job of calling out like the different facets here. You talked about like key exposure, for example, and I think it really highlights the need to have a very robust and intentional approach to controls. On the AI construction side, breaches start with all of the boring stuff like exposed keys, overly permissive roles, sloppy logging. So, bolting AI services onto customer service, your internal tools, you're also bolting on new ways for attackers to exfiltrate data, which I think just further highlights the need to have regulatory and frameworks and intentionality around how we secure AI.
And I mean, the very nature of what we're often asking AI to do means that it's going to have a lot of permissions and a lot of access. If
Mhm.
it's pulling into, customer databases, if it's then pulling things together, which is often what we're after AI to do. Um, this risk is quite different from the risk that's posed by AI consumption. And this is where that shift happens, moving from infrastructure to employees. How are your employees leveraging AI apps or AI agents? Are they using ChatGPT regularly? Are they coding with Claude Code? Does that usage sit within an approved context or an unapproved context? And what are the consequences? It's worthwhile analyzing this both from the lens of how can we have visibility and secure what we're putting into AI inputs, and then how are we using outputs? Because there's sort of different security risks there. But certainly, I know a lot of CISOs are already contending with the growing sprawl of AI apps, approved or otherwise, which has an array of risks. I wanted to briefly mention MITRE's Atlas. I'm a big fan of MITRE, um, if specifically because there's a trend in our industry to talk about attacks that could happen, may happen, will happen in the future. MITRE's out here documenting attacks as they are, what has happened in the wild, and their new I should say their new matrix. It took me a while to find the word matrix. Their new matrix specifically for how AI systems can be and are attacked in the wild, I think is a wake-up call for us as within security to know that these attacks aren't on the horizon, they're here. And there's a real curve of MITRE updating this, by the way. Between 2020 and 24, there was something like 13 updates based on real world attack campaigns. Just last year, there was six. So it's really sharpening, and I expect this year to see more and more updates from MITRE as we document how are these systems being targeted. So let's chat a little bit about the trend of regulation and deregulation that's happening stateside. Um, this isn't for us to put any sort of commentary on changing political spectrums, but it is worthwhile noting that there's been a to and fro between executive orders from the current administration and the previous administration. The previous administration came out with an executive order specifically on safe and secure and trustworthy development and use of AI. That's been preempted by the January 25 executive order of removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence, which means that the scope of a lot of regulation that was released in 24 federally no longer applies. If we do want to look forward at what to expect from 2026 for American regulation, I think the July publication of America's AI Action Plan points to where the future may take us to. Specifically, they call out the risk. So there's no minimizing of the risk. The risk is well seen across critical infrastructure where AI is going to sit. AI then will be targeted. And so security is required. And specifically, it points to recommended actions of establishing an ISAC that is AI specific and guidance from DHS specifically on how private sector entities can respond to AI specific threat campaigns and vulnerabilities that may become clear through the year. So we've got a little light forward of what regulation may look like. And that leads us to the December executive order, which has direct instructions of how the US is going to approach regulation, which is generally an approach of how can we have federal guidance that is consistent rather than piecemeal state regulation. So let's look at this executive order in a little bit of detail. Specifically, it's a call for uniform national AI policy to override state-specific regulation. That starts with striking down some state regulations that already exist and some state laws that already exist. So specifically, the Department of Justice is spinning up a litigation task force to challenge state laws that conflict with federal policy that's going to be forthcoming or that the DOJ finds unconstitutional. Similarly, the Department of Commerce is directed to look at where do current state laws hinder innovation or promote deception. And then there's a stick here for the potential to restrict federal funding for states that hold tight to their legislation that the DOJ and the DOC may label as conflicting or burdensome. And then in terms of the commissions, the Federal Trade Commission has been directed to look for where are there state laws that are currently unfair or deceptive, and how will those be preempted by national policy? And finally, Matt, I always forget what the second C is here. Communications? Is that it?
Yeah,
Federal
the
Communications
Communication Commission.
Commission.
Yeah.
Um, there's great movements here on how can there be a US standard for reporting and disclosure. So if everything previously has been a little bit about undoing state by state legislation and leading with a nationwide policy, here we have the first steps in that policy of the FCC directed to have heightened and consistent reporting and disclosures. But where else, though, can we look to get clues of what regulation might look like? Matt, you wanted to walk us through a few things.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So it really is an interesting study in just the workings of U.S. federal policy and then also how the states respond to it. So there's certainly no shortage of guidance and recommendations that have been made at all different levels. So, Chris, you did a good job of addressing some of the executive orders and how they have conflicted and rolled back and taken different approaches. Let's talk about what else is on the field right now as far as U.S. AI policy. So, 3 different documents, 3 different stories, and I'll tell you which ones matter. So, first up, on the left, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. So this was published in 2023. In my opinion, this should really be the playbook for most organizations that are operating inside of the US. So what it does is it gives you a structure to think about AI risk across the entire life cycle, from design to deployment to retirement. And we have another slide where we're going to double click on this here in just a moment. But here's why it matters. It's voluntary. It wasn't created by an executive order. It wasn't created by Congress. NIST built it through public-private collaboration, which means that it can survive administration changes, which is really important right now. So it's still being updated. They added a bit to it in 2024. But if you're building an AI governance program and you're not in this document, you need to be. The next one is from the Department of Homeland Security, Safety and Security Guidelines for Critical Infrastructure. This really takes the NIST framework and it makes it specific for critical infrastructure. So that's water, energy, transportation. There's, I think, 15 or 16 different sectors. And it breaks AI risk into different buckets based on sort of real world situations. So attackers using AI against you, attackers targeting your AI systems, and then just your AI failing from a resilience standpoint. So the DHS has been directed to continue providing guidance on AI safety. So this is still a solid blueprint for how to think about AI risk in different operational environments. And then lastly, there's the Treasury report on AI cybersecurity risks. Funny thing about this one, if you try to pull it up now, you get a page not loaded. So it's no longer accessible. But here's what it was for. You can still find it throughout the internet. People have managed to have retained copies for it. What it did is it identified specific ways AI creates cyber and fraud risk in the financial sector. So it recommended like a common AI lexicon. Think about it like nutrition labels for AI models, and really expanded NIST for financial services. So the bottom line, it's anchor yourself to NIST. It's stable. And then you can use some of these additional resources for additional color. And yeah, so let's go to the next slide, Chris, and we can talk a little bit more around the risk management framework and what's actually in it. So there's 4 functions, and if you've implemented the cybersecurity framework before, this is going to feel very familiar to you. So starting in the center is govern. So this is basically who's in charge and what are the rules as function. And here's what it actually means. The questions it seeks to address are, do you have someone accountable for AI risk? Do you have policies that cover how AI gets approved and deployed and retired? Do your executives understand what AI systems are running in production and what decisions they're making? So this is a critical piece, but really, I think probably the most important one for you to take a look at would be map. So map is where your inventory and your context is really captured. So it's seeking to answer the questions. Do you know what AI systems that you have, right? Not just the ones that IT deployed, but the ones that your marketing team signed up for with a credit card. Do you know what data they access, what decisions they influence? Sort of the saying goes in cyber, you can't manage what you don't see. You can't manage risk that you haven't mapped. So that's map. Moving on from there is measure. This is where I see most organizations fail. And what it actually means is, how do you know if your AI is performing as intended? What metrics are you tracking? When the model degrades, how quickly do you detect it? And then the bottom one is around manage. So this is where you actually do something. When you find a risk, what's the playbook? Can you roll back a model? Can you kill an agent that's misbehaving? This is the prioritize and act function. So knowing about risk without acting on it, it's just expensive anxiety. So 4 functions: govern, map, measure, manage. Start with map and find out what you have, and then everything else builds from there.
Thanks for that, Matt.
Sure. There's just a couple additional guidelines, and I'm just going to roll through these very quickly. One resource, deploying AI systems securely. So if you look at those logos, that's NSA, CISA, FBI, plus the 5 Eyes. What's really interesting about this one, this is the intelligence community telling you how to actually deploy AI without getting owned. So it's highly tactical. It covers hardening configurations and supply chain and IR. So if the risk management framework is your what, this is your how. And what's great about this one, it's free, it's unclassified, and it's built by the people who see what adversaries are actually doing to AI systems. And then the bottom one is ISO 42001. This is the first international standard for AI management systems. So if you have gone through and done an ISO 27001 for information security, it's going to feel very similar. I think where it matters is if you're selling AI-enabled products to enterprises. This certification is going to start showing up like in procurement requirements. Now, it's not mandatory yet, but neither was SOC 2 until it suddenly was. So those are good ones to keep an eye on and add to your stack. And then lastly, before we shift to the EU Act, I'm a big fan of the Johari window, which sort of seeks to address the known knowns, the known unknowns, and sort of this state of knowing and unknowing. There are a few things that we have identified as known unknowns, right? And so over the next 6 to 12 months, the first question, how hard will the feds fight state AI laws? We don't know yet. States like Colorado and Illinois are not waiting around. They're already moving ahead. So what this means is your AI compliance plan needs to be modular. So it needs to be built in such a way so that if the states gain supremacy versus the federal or vice versa, you're not going to be rewriting your entire program. So important to keep in mind. The second is we don't know what happens when funding gets used as leverage around AI. So states and agencies can change requirements fast to protect grants and federal dollars, and then that all cascades down. So don't assume that you have time to react. I think the key here is to get going on the process of mapping the usage of AI, have a modular focus, be ready to adapt, but this one is still very up in the air. The third is around federal AI disclosure rules. We're recommending that you start building your evidence pack now, right? So AI inventory, your data flows, your control documentation. If you have recently gone through like a tools rationalization exercise, application dependency mapping, things like that from an enterprise standpoint, this should feel very familiar to you. If you wait until the rule drops to start gathering this information, you're already behind. So it's important to make sure that you're collecting that type of operational knowledge. Fourth, DHS sector guidance. So right now it's voluntary, but here's how voluntary becomes mandatory. It shows up in federal contracts, in regulator exam questions and cyber insurance applications. So it can quickly go from being a recommendation one day to being a major requirement, especially if you're operating in relationship to the government. So keep an eye on that. So I think the bottom line is compliance is a lagging indicator. Resilience is a leading one. So I think as cybersecurity experts, we really need to do more than just block attacks. The reality is we are cyber resilience experts now, and our mission is to make sure that the business can take a hit and stay standing and recover fast. So keep all of these sort of on the front burner, so to speak, as you seek to gain that visibility and make sure you're doing your documentation. But Chris, I'd like to hand it over to you. You're much more of an authority on the EU side. I'd love to hear what you have to say around the EU AI Act.
Yeah, let's extend the horizon beyond American regulation. The EU AI Act was its first ever legal framework. It talks explicitly about the risks of AI, and it divides that into those that are deploying AI systems and those that are providing AI systems. And it's a positioning for Europe to take a leading role in what AI regulation is going to look like globally. And the reason why that is because there's an outsized influence from the EU AI Act. Just like GDPR, it's not about EU member states, it's about where are Europeans touched by AI. And as such, it's going to affect Singaporean, American, Australian businesses who have to showcase that they're meeting the standards, just as we all have with GDPR. I think we know the extent to which GDPR has been adopted as a de facto standard, which we all need to meet. It's worthwhile pointing out that there are fines associated with the EU AI Act. It doesn't go to the minimum side of the fines. The way in which it's written, it's a set amount or 7% of the profit an organization makes, whichever is higher. So it tends towards the higher one. And it's worthwhile me pointing out that the EU has not been shy in handing out these fines. There's been a cumulative 6.7 billion out from GDPR. And the Digital Services Act has just gotten going within the last year. They've already levied about 140 million in fines. And again, these aren't only hitting European organizations, they're hitting American firms, they're hitting Australian firms. I'm Australian, by the way, so that's why I keep talking about Australia, but they're hitting international firms. So let's have a little look about the EU AI Act specifically. Quick timeline for all of us. 24 was when it was written into law, and it went into force 20 days later. The first wave of enforcement was just about banning what the AI Act outlines as unacceptable risk. And that's generally things like, hey, how can AI be used as part of biometric surveillance? social scoring of people, AI that manipulates humans, essentially. August of last year is where formal bodies were established that were going to ensure that the EU AI Act is really properly put into place. So a supervisory body and an AI board became operational. The standards the EU AI Act set for general purpose AI, so that's the standards they set for the makers of LLMs, also began enforcement at this date. Moving forward, August of this year, enforcement is going to begin for everything that sits under high risk. And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time dissecting today. And that's when the formal bodies are going to be able to start levying fines and enacting their market powers. And then moving forward into August of next year, the enforcement is going to extend to systems that were built before the act was written in the first place. So pre-24 systems. So enforcement's going to hit this year for everything that's new. Next year, it'll be everything that's old as well. So let's have a little bit of a look at the risk tiers. Low and minimal risk, limited risk, high risk, and unacceptable risk. I've already given a brief outlining of the kinds of practices that are prohibited in unacceptable risk. So let's get rid of that. And it's worthwhile then me stating that there's no obligations from the low and minimal risk tier. This is the majority of AI use as it was available as of 2021. For example, the use of AI in the way that SentinelOne leverages AI and multiple ML models to look for the behavior of processes that might be malicious. This is also the kind of things like AI and spam filters, AI in video games. Where will there be regulation? Limited risk is going to have transparency obligations. Generally, limited risk is going to be systems that are generating audio, generating images, video, or text content. So chatbots are going to fall into this. It's essentially about ensuring that humans that are engaging with that system understand that it's an AI system. That being said, there are requirements here that these AI systems are robust and reliable as far as technically feasible. So there are some light security, there is light security language there for obligations of limited risk AI systems to be secure. When we go to high risk, this is where the compliance really comes into place. This is AI as it's used in education and in training. AI that directs employment choices, that directs cultural choices, AI as it's maybe used in law enforcement, in critical infrastructure, public services. So any use of AI that's going to change a decision or communication to do with how a human receives any public service, that's going to hit a high risk, and any technology that relates to elections. It's worthwhile noting that the language in which is used here is also going to extend to social media as well. So what does this regulated compliance look like? At a high level, it means passing bars for cybersecurity, for frameworks of risk management, data governance, record keeping, quality management, human in the loop, instructions for use, and technical documentation. There's quite a lot here. As to lightly touch, there's tenets of ensuring secure design, develop, and maintain. Explicitly are the measures to prevent, detect, and respond, and resolve and control for attacks. So there's specific compliance requirements for quite sophisticated security bars to be met. The record keeping was another that I thought was particularly interesting because it mandates detailed logging with a minimum of 6-month retention. I know logging standards change across industries, but knowing that any high-risk AI system and app is going to need detailed logging, so not just generic logging, but detailed, full inference of input, output, human, the sort of the incident, so such that an incident can be mapped from start to finish. detailed logging for a minimum of 6 month retention, which is obviously for the purpose of assisting security compliance and investigations and remediation. So to cover our known unknowns again, I'm going to toss back to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'm not in Europe. I'm not a EU regulatory expert, but as I think about the very good content that Chris put together and sort of that succinct overview, a couple things come to mind that I think is worth considering. So um, I do believe the EU AI Act it's a major step, right? It's setting a baseline for safety and accountability. I think the real story over the next 6 to 12 months will really be in how this act gets interpreted and operationalized and enforced in the real world. So that's sort of the table stakes. Next, will the code of practice for general purpose AI become the de facto rulebook? We don't know yet. I think one of the biggest signals to watch for is how the largest AI model providers respond. If they adopt it early, I think it sets a practical baseline for everyone else. So if the big players don't sign on, it tells you something about where the friction really is. Um, Moving on to risk definitions, we don't know if they will stay consistent or shift, right? So these, from a policy standpoint, this structure gets put together, but in the actual implementation of it, there can be pushback from very large and influential organizations that may require sort of a reclassification of some of these risk definitions. So I think that you should plan for this, but also plan for the potential of these risk categories or thresholds to move. And so going back to like what I said around the US policies, really try to focus on being modular and flexible and having even just an informal process in your mind about how you would reclassify your systems quickly if some of those definitions change. We also don't know how aggressive enforcement will get, right? So if you are on the smaller end, smaller organizations, you may have a bit more flexibility with this. Obviously, larger organizations in healthcare, in finance, might have the target on you or just a higher level of inspection. So I think you need to ask yourself, and really every security leader should ask themselves, which of your AI deployments could become a headline? And if you don't know an answer, really go back to sort of the first step, taking a very robust inventory. And then finally, what counts as adequate cybersecurity for AI? Will standards converge fast enough to be usable? My advice is don't wait for perfect standards. Start mapping, get your inventories put together, start mapping to measurable controls now. So we have, the NIST risk management framework. We have ISO 42001. So whatever gives you structure, be ready, to swap out any formal benchmarks as they land. So these are the places where rules are still being written. Definitions can move. So it's important to plan accordingly and sort of keep these in your back pocket as you're looking to adopt AI responsibly.
Something that I'll add in here is I think we're going to need flexibility moving forward because the nature of AI adoption is going to continue to shift. I
Yeah.
think we're all pretty well across. Hey, our employees might be leveraging AI web apps. They might be leveraging ChatGPT. They might be leveraging Gemini. They might be looking at Grok. There's then controls that are going to be good enough to look at inference for AI web apps. Uh, do you have the same game plan for AI desktop apps or for AI agents as they deploy? Um,
Mm.
we're going to need flexibility of control because then though those needs are going to, I think, evolve quite drastically this year as consumption continues to have that parabolic curve of adoption that we're already seeing. Before I talk a little bit about SentinelOne, an important note on regulations and compliance. SentinelOne provides security outcomes, and those security outcomes can work to help you meet regulation obligations. But it's really important to note that while SentinelOne provides technical controls, we do not assess, we do not certify regulations or compliance. That accountability certainly still sits with the organizations who have to meet those standards. We do not replace legal governance risk requirements, but we certainly can help and support with controls. So, who are we? Who is SentinelOne? Bit late in the presentation, but let's get to it. We're the enterprise-wide AI protection platform that protects from modern threats by delivering machine speed. And we do that with AI. And certainly, given the AI adoption that we've discussed today, it's become quite clear that organizations need two major pillars. They need AI for security to have that machine speed. How can analysts be sped up? How can the way in which we respond to threats be evolved? How can we have agentic and automatic responses to threats? But given that we're also adopting AI that potentially is introducing a new risk surface, we're going to need security for AI. Now, there's a tremendous amount that SentinelOne does within the security for AI space that ranges from securing the design lifecycle to the storage for the data that's powering AI applications to outcomes that are employee driven. Now, there's a few that fall under the banner of prompt security. And Matt's going to talk a little bit about prompt security and the outcomes that they can provide for AI for security and security for AI.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Chris. So at SentinelOne, we see AI for security and security for AI addressing four distinct challenges. And prompt is the solution that, from an overarching standpoint, addresses each of these. So employees using AI tools, developers coding with AI assistance, teams building AI-powered applications, and now autonomous agents making decisions on their own. So each one introduces different risks. Each one needs purpose-built protection, and that's where prompt comes in. So just to quickly walk through this and provide an overview. So prompt for employees. This gives you complete security, visibility, and governance over how AI tools are being used across your organization. Your people can adopt AI without you worrying about shadow AI or data privacy issues or regulatory risk, as we discussed today. And it also includes real-time coaching. So employees learn safe AI habits as they go. So that's AI safety without slowing down innovation. Prompt for AI coding comes next. This one is for your dev teams. So you want to use Copilot and Cursor, all those AI code assistants, but you're nervous about the risks. Prompt for AI coding integrates with thousands of AI tools, dozens of code assistants, nearly 30 languages. So you get full visibility into what's happening across your dev cycles and can catch privacy violations before they become problems in your dev environments. Third is prompt for your AI app. So if you're building AI-powered applications like nearly every organization out there, this is for you. So prompt for AI apps protects against things like prompt injection, jailbreaks, denial of wallet, rogue agents, unsafe content, etc. Really from soup to nuts. It filters and obfuscates sensitive data on the fly, so you can stay compliant when you're connected to those third-party LLMs or vector databases, and it keeps your users from seeing harmful or off-brand content. And then lastly is prompt for agentic AI. And this one is very exciting. Everyone today is talking about MCP, the Model Context Protocol. Both a security opportunity inside of MCP and also a real risk exposure. So purple MCP alongside of prompt for agentic AI is really the solution to get a hold of it. So you get full visibility into your MCP activity through our gateway. You get dynamic risk scoring and insight into how your agents are actually behaving. Because the reality is that AI is moving fast and agentic AI is promising to only accelerate that velocity. And so the only question that matters is really whether you're securing it or just hoping for the best. And here at SentinelOne, we don't hope, we protect. So with that, sort of a quick overview of prompt. And Chris, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Matt. If you want to see prompt in action, if you'd like help meeting any of the security outcomes that we've discussed today, please drop a comment and we'll reach out to you. Alternatively, you can visit our website, which has got a range of information on all of our solutions, which span far beyond AI, but unfortunately, we had a limited amount of time today. Again, a thank you to my partner Matt for sharing the stage with me today, and a big thank you to our audience. Hope this was useful, and the best of luck for everyone as we move forward securing AI. Thank you.